Imagine you're a successful businessman in 1925 Paris. A government official invites you to a private meeting at the fanciest hotel in the city. He leans across the table, lowers his voice, and tells you the French government wants to sell you the Eiffel Tower. You'd say no, right? Andre Poisson said yes. He wrote a check, and then the guy who sold it to him did it again to someone else. Welcome to the world of history's greatest con artists. These are people who didn't just lie, they built entire worlds out of thin air and convinced everyone around them to move in. From fake countries to stolen landmarks, these scams are so ridiculous they'd get rejected as movie plots. Except every single one of them actually happened. Victor Lustig spoke 5 languages, carried 45 fake passports, and had a smile that could convince you the sky was green. Born in what is now the Czech Republic in 1890, he started his criminal career cheating rich people at cards on transatlantic cruise ships. But that was just the warm-up. In 1925, Lustig read a newspaper article in Paris about the Eiffel Tower. The thing was rusting, it cost a fortune to maintain, 60 tons of paint every 7 years. The article casually mentioned that some people thought it should just be torn down. Most people would read that and turn the page. Lustig read it and saw a business opportunity. He hired a forger to make official government letterhead. He rented a suite at the Hôtel des Crayons, one of the most expensive hotels in Paris. Then he invited 5 of the biggest scrap metal dealers in the city to a confidential meeting. Picture the scene. 5 businessmen in suits sitting in a gilded hotel room, while a man calling himself the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs explains with great regret that the French government can no longer afford to maintain the Eiffel Tower. 7,000 tons of iron available to the highest bidder. Very hush-hush, of course. Can't let the public find out. He even took them on a tour of the Eiffel Tower. Workers happened to be there measuring it for routine repairs. Lustig told his marks they were preparing for demolition. He zeroed in on Andre Poisson, a newcomer to Paris in business who was desperate to prove himself among the city's elite. Lustig met with him privately and pulled the oldest trick in the con artist playbook. He admitted he was corrupt. He said his government salary wasn't enough for a man of his taste, and he'd appreciate a little something extra to make sure Poisson's won the bid. Poisson paid the bribe, paid for the tower. Lustig took the money and caught a train to Austria. Here's the genius part. Lustig bet that Poisson would be too humiliated to go to the police, and he was right. Not a single newspaper reported the scam. So Lustig came back to Paris and did the whole thing again with a completely different group of dealers. The second time, his mark actually called the cops. Lustig fled to America, where he pulled off dozens more cons, including allegedly swindling Al Capone out of $50,000 by promising to double it in a stock deal, then returning the original money and claiming the deal fell through. Capone was so impressed by Lustig's apparent honesty that he gave him $5,000 as a tip. The whole thing was a setup just to get that $5,000. Lustig was eventually caught running a counterfeiting operation so massive it threatened the confidence in the US dollar. He escaped from Manhattan Detention Center by cutting through the bars and climbing down a rope made of bed sheets. When bystanders stopped and stared, he pulled out a rag and pretended to be a window cleaner. Then he bowed and sprinted away, but they caught him. They caught him again. A judge sentenced him to 20 years on Alcatraz. A Secret Service agent reportedly told him before sentencing, "Count, you're the smoothest con man that ever lived." On his death certificate under profession, someone wrote apprentice salesman. If you think selling the Eiffel Tower is bold, Gregor McGregor would like a word. Because this Scottish soldier didn't just sell something that wasn't his, he sold something that didn't even exist. McGregor was born in Scotland in 1786 and joined the army at 16. He fought in South America's independence wars, served under Simon Bolivar, married Bolivar's cousin, and was promoted to general. He was a real war hero, and also a compulsive liar who exaggerated every single one of his achievements. In 1820, McGregor convinced a tribal king on the Mosquito Coast of Central America to hand him over 8 million acres of swampy mosquito-infested jungle in exchange for rum and jewelry. Then he sailed back to London, announced he was the cacique, the prince of a thriving new nation called Poyas. And here's what separates McGregor from every other con artist in history. The level of detail. He didn't just claim Poyas existed, he built an entire fictional world. He designed a national flag, he wrote a national anthem, he printed Poyas currency. He opened a Poyas embassy in London. He published a 350-page guidebook complete with maps, crop statistics, and a glowing description of the capital city, St. Joseph, which supposedly had an opera house, a bank, and wide boulevards. The author of this guidebook was Thomas Strangeway, but the funny thing is, Thomas Strangeways didn't exist either. McGregor convinced the London banks to back £200,000 in Poyas bonds. He sold land at 11 pounds per 100 acres. He sold military commissions, government posts, and merchant licenses. People exchanged their life savings for poised dollars. In 1822, the first 70 settlers set sail from London. A few months later, another 180 left from Scotland. MacGregor personally saw them off at the dock, waving goodbye to families who had traded everything they owned for a passage to paradise. When they arrived on the coast of Central America, there was no capital, no opera house, no bank, no roads, just miles of dense, insect-choked jungle and tropical heat that hit them like a wall. The settlers were so thoroughly convinced that Poyas was real that they assumed they'd simply landed in the wrong spot. They set up camp on the beach and waited for rescue. Then rainy season came, malaria came, yellow fever came. They rationed whatever food they'd brought from the ship while their children died around them. By the time a rescue ship from a nearby British colony arrived, nearly 2/3 of the settlers were dead. About 50 survivors made it back to Britain, skeletal and broken. A Scottish newspaper described them as ghastly cadaverous. And here's the most insane part. Some of the survivors defended MacGregor. They testified that Poyas must be real and they'd simply gotten lost. The con was so thorough, so meticulously constructed, that people who had literally watched their families die in the jungle still couldn't accept they'd been lied to. MacGregor was never convicted. He fled to France and ran the exact same scam there. He was arrested, tried, and acquitted. He kept selling Poyas bonds into the 1830s. When he finally retired, he moved to Venezuela and lived comfortably on a military pension until he died at 58. He is buried with full military honors in Carcass Cathedral. History's deadliest con artist got away with it. Frank Abagnale was 16 years old when he decided that being a teenager was boring, so he became a pilot instead. Between the ages of 16 and 21, Abagnale posed as a Pan Am co-pilot, a doctor, a lawyer, and a university professor, all without any training or qualifications in any of those fields. He flew over 1 million miles on more than 250 flights by forging a Pan Am employee ID and simply walking onto planes. When airlines started getting suspicious, he became a pediatrician at Georgia Hospital for nearly a year. When a baby had a medical emergency and the staff turned to him for direction, he realized he had no idea what a blue baby was and quit the next day. He passed the Louisiana bar exam on his 3rd attempt, and this was without going to law school. He just studied for 8 weeks and passed. The whole time, he was cashing forged checks in 26 countries. He eventually forged roughly $2.5 million worth. When the FBI finally caught him in France, he was 21. He served time in a French prison, then a Swedish prison, then was extradited to the US. Here's the twist. After serving less than 5 years, Abagnale was offered a deal. The FBI hired him as a consultant to teach agents how to catch forgers. He worked with them ever since, helping design the security features on modern-day checks, passports, and government documents. The guy who spent his youth faking everything now gets paid to stop people from faking things. Believe it or not, Steven Spielberg made it into a movie. Leonardo DiCaprio played the teenage con artist. Tom Hanks played the FBI agent who caught him. The real Abagnale reportedly said the movie was about 80% accurate, which, for a guy who built his career on lying, might itself be a con. When someone says, "I've got a bridge to sell you," they're referencing this guy. George C. Parker was a New York con artist in the late 1800s who specialized in selling landmarks he didn't own. He sold the Brooklyn Bridge repeatedly, sometimes twice a week. His victims were typically immigrants who had just arrived in New York and didn't know how things worked yet. Parker would approach a newcomer at the bridge, strike up a friendly conversation, claim to be the owner, and offer them an incredible deal. The buyer could set up a toll booth on the bridge and charge everyone who crossed. Some victims actually tried to set up toll booths before police stopped them. But Parker didn't stop at bridges. He also sold Madison Square Garden, he sold the Metropolitan Museum of Art, he sold the Statue of Liberty and Grant's Tomb. If it was famous, large, and bolted to the ground in New York City, you better bet Parker tried to sell it. He was caught multiple times and kept going. After his 3rd conviction, he was sentenced to life at Sing Sing prison. He reportedly became one of the most popular inmates there, entertaining guards and prisoners alike with stories of his cons. A model prisoner, charming to the very end. What connects all of these people isn't just audacity, it's the fact that every single one of them understood something fundamental about human psychology. People don't get conned because they're stupid, they get conned because they want to believe. Andre Poisson wanted to believe he was joining the Parisien elite. Scottish settlers wanted to believe in a better life across the ocean. Immigrants in New York wanted to believe America really was the land of opportunity, even if that opportunity was a toll booth on a bridge someone was selling for cash. The con only works when the victim's dream is bigger than their doubt. And that's a lesson that's just as relevant today as it was in 1925 Paris or 1820s London. Because somewhere right now, someone is reading an email from a Nigerian prince, and somewhere deep down, a tiny part of them is thinking, what if this is real?